Hi, Dorcus, you are there. Nice to see you.
Hi, Daniela. Nice to
Thanks
see
for
you.
joining online. So, well, Dorcus is working at the CGIAR, and it's a pleasure having you today. So I give you the floor to present about Beyond G/E and, well, also thinking about the partners and the end users of the varieties that are developed.
Thank you, Daniela. My name is Dorcus. I work at the CGIAR, as you've been told, and I lead a team that helps the breeding teams to operate their breeding programs more efficiently. So I'm going to talk a bit about the CGIAR, which I have heard you've been hearing since morning, so hopefully the repetition is not that bad. I'm going to talk about the work that we do and some challenges in capturing especially the M part of the G by E and M. And I'm going to share some open questions that several of the breeding teams that I work with do have, that some of the people in this room can help to answer. So, of course, we've heard a lot about the CGIAR, and there are 15 centers. Yana just talked about one, which is ICRAF at the moment. And you can see that we're working globally, especially targeting smallholder farms. Out of those 15 centers, 8 of them do plant breeding, and this is the scope of what I'm going to be referring to today. And our core business in the CGIAR, we do a lot of other research, but the core business is crop improvement. And we breed for productivity, resistance to pests and diseases, better nutrition, resilience, sustainability, and adaptability to climate changes. You can find a lot of evidence about what has been done in breeding for productivity in the CGIAR. Several teams can demonstrate genetic gains for different traits and especially yields in different regions of the globe. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. You can have some references and read on that. Breeding for resistance to transboundary pests and diseases. The teams have been very adept in responding to some of the new challenges as they arise, given the wide reach of the target population of environments that we target with the different crops. And in this case, the scope of the crops I'm referring to is about 21. And progress is being made across all those crops and in the 4 frontiers that I have mentioned previously. Some of them being more challenging to the others, especially, for example, on the right, you can see cassava and banana, which are clonal crops, and transferring planting material across environments is normally a challenge for those crops. Nevertheless, I think breeding teams are doing a good job breeding for those biotic constraints. For breeding for better nutrition, there is a lot of effort that has gone into this, looking at provitamin A, looking at iron and zinc and things like that, that are actually focused on the low-income countries, as well as the smallholder farms that we work for. And you can always check out the evidence of that in some of the publications that have been shown here. For resilience, as you have seen, since we work globally, we have a diverse number of crops already, 21 in this case. We specifically focused to breed for drylands. This is already mainstreamed, and some of those centers, the 8 centers, focus mainly on dryland crops, cereals and legumes. And they are also improved efforts to build resilience into those crops that would normally grow into non-dryland regions. Some evidence of that is there. I just wanted to give you an overview of the work that we do from the breeder's perspective, the aforementioned breeder's perspective. And this work has demonstrated a lot of impact. If you are interested to see, it is suggested that this tenfold return on investment for every dollar that has been invested in the CGIAR. So the breeding teams have done a good job at it. Yes, but the main job, of course, of the breeding teams is to develop new varieties and have them released within the regions that we have. And we have done self-reflection. We release varieties, and where are we? Are those varieties being adopted on the market? And what could be some of those challenges? And I'm just using an example here of one of our centers, SIP, and the number of varieties bred within a period of time. And you can see that even though a number of varieties have been released across the years, when you look at the potato, this is average age of years of the varieties that are currently on the farmers' fields. And the adoption percent of the crop of the new varieties in the market, you can see that is less than 40% in this case, even though a lot of varieties have been released. I'm just using potato in this case as one of the example crops that we have. The same situation, you can see a lot of that being in this region. And this tells us that yes, we've done a good job, we have developed varieties, but there is something that is hindering them to penetrate the market. Of course, it can not only be because of genetics, there are a lot of other issues along the value chain, but in this case, within the sphere of breeding, we can only control the genetics of the different crops that we are working on. And so in this case, even though we're releasing those varieties, they still need to show impact in the whole value chain. And so most of our stakeholders are interested in the CGIAR breeding teams showing this impact. And so far, even the publications that I showed before are showing genetic gain at this level of improved breeding systems. And it is necessary that at least that genetic gain translates into what happens in the farmer's field. And that is like on-farm performance data in this case. And this is where the G by E and M becomes very important for the CGIAR breeding programs. Of course, the other steps are also dependent on this. But so far, I think in the sphere of control of the breeding teams would be until this step. And since this is where the management becomes very important on farm, and I wanted to highlight, this is a need that has been highlighted. The breeding teams have been reorienting to capture some of these things. And I'm going to now highlight some of the challenges that we experience with the approaches that we do have. Of course, as you have seen, the reach being almost global, that's a very diverse operating environments for the breeding teams. And within the same country, you can have a lot of diversity in terms of the farms, and the farmers, the typology of the farmers that you can get. You can also have a lot of diversity in terms of policies. For example, within a country, a government might decide to subsidize fertilizer this year, but not next year. The same thing when you look at between the countries, because most of our breeding efforts and the market segments we target are across countries, they are regional. And you might find that the policies in one country of that market segment and the other are quite different. And therefore, several questions arise on how should we target our genetics. Several people say, why don't we just breed for genetic gains under good conditions and assume that the other value chain actors can improve maybe the policies, maybe the agronomy and things like that. The others think, could we also mimic conditions on farmers' fields using managed stress trials? Those efforts have been tried, of course, so far. The other thought is to adapt genetics to the farmers' current conditions. But we've seen all the diversity that exists, especially in the management part, because for the environment, I think it's now easier to get that data from all the databases that exist globally. But how do we deal with the diverse farm typologies in this case to ensure that we capture the aim and represent all those typologies in our breeding programs? Just to show you examples, I don't have real data to show here because data belongs to the programs. And if, for example, we were to go for the optimal genetic gains plus agronomy, in this case, you can see this is a cassava field on station in one of our research stations. You can see the breeder here is very happy with the crop that is there. Now, what happens when we send the same crop on farm? And this is one of the on-farm trial site. You can see clear differences about the conditions on station and on farm. But you can also see differences between one farm and the next just across the road. And you can see that even though this cassava is not as good as what you see on station, it's better than what we can see on this farm because this farmer did not require to eat a lot of cassava leaves. Cassava, some parts of these regions eat the leaf and the root in this case, but this farmer needed to eat the leaves. And so that affects also what kind of data you'd get on the roots and things like that. And this shows you the difference of the typology of the farms, even within a short distance. And therefore, if we just bred for optimal genetics without considering these variations, then we might not be able to place the varieties in the target markets. On the issue of mimicking farmer conditions in managed trials, there is limited capacity for managed stress trials or control phenotyping in these public programs of the CGIAR and the national partners that we work with. And even those few, and I think Yana also showed some of these facilities, it's difficult to replicate all environments and the management situations that you might get in the real situations where we're supposed to place those varieties. And also very few of these programs have a resident physiologist. And even those who do have, as Yana has alluded to, the physiological studies and the breeding needs are not very well aligned in this case. And then when it comes, a lot of effort has gone into adapting the genetics to the farmers' conditions where we've gone to test on farm, used innovative and new methods to try and reach more farms and things like that. But what we find is that the farm typologies are very diverse in this case. There is a lot of gender, socioeconomic factors, different management based on the agricultural policies that are existing and things like that. And this affects, of course, from the results that we get, this affects the decisions that we can make based on adapting the genetics. Can we sample all these typologies adequately. And because of that, there are standing questions. I'm just highlighting a few here. The first one being, how do we deploy G by E and M beyond the research setting? As we have demonstrated quite well about the models and crop models. How do we reliably capture the complexity in the smallholder farms in our G by E and M approaches? The other concern would be, how do we design those on-farm verification trials to ensure that we can test our materials, our genetics on the farm at a scale that represents the diverse M part especially. How do we sample those farmers? Do we do it randomly? Do we stratify to target a specific socioeconomic class? How do we deal with logistical and operational considerations for running on-farm verification trials at scale? What kind of data can be reliably collected at this scale to support the G by E and M modeling? And a number of other questions that you might think of that fit in this scenario that I was describing. And I would wish to thank you for listening.
Thanks, Dorcus, for bringing in this very relevant point about how to incorporate this farm variation and the variety adoption. Are there any questions for Dorcus? Please, Martin. Where is the cube here? Okay, thanks. You run faster than me, so thank you. In the meantime, yeah, you have your microphone already. Yeah, thanks.
Is it working?
Yeah.
I'm practicing this every day with my grandkids these days. So, Dorcus, thanks for the nice presentation. I just this morning, Martin Krop, I am, by the way, we know each other. We had Prasanna's slides. I showed also some of the result slides, and also that he is having now 2,000 locations on farm and basically station. I saw your questions. Do you think that the data that's being collected in the MACE program is good enough, or are you still advising them to change it? Because, of course, you oversee with the Excellence in Breeding program all the different breeding programs. Is that MACE program now a good example, which I said this morning, by the way? Or do you think that still we have a long way to go?
Yeah, I think the MACE program is one of our flagship programs that is making effort in scaling out on-farm verification in this case. And ideally, yeah, the data that they're generating is very important to inform some of our global decisions in this case. But some of these challenges are actually also being raised by the MACE program in generating those data. But in general, they are headed in the right direction with some other programs that are going into this direction. So hopefully in the couple of years, we might have more data to be able to say something about how to capture the M and include it in our breeding objectives.
Thanks. So I see a few hands here. I think Mark was first. Oh, okay.
Maybe I'll just add a little bit of context. I think that from my own experience from 20 years in the commercial world, where basically you live and die by getting this right, there is no sort of gold. I mean, there's no end point. It's a continuous improvement exercise. So I think that, as Dorcas said, I think it's really good to see a number of the CG programs that are making the efforts to head into this process. And I think the questions that are coming are part of the questions that are live in the commercial world, where they're basically asking the same thing. So how do we close the gap between the information we need and the information we can currently get. So the commitment to continuous improvement is a critical mindset change that's really important, so that you don't suddenly decide, yeah, we've done this, we stop funding it, we move on. You have to continually invest. Yeah.
I think, okay, last question.
Thank you, Dorcus. Quick question. Why is it a relevant metric, the penetration in the market for you? And how do you collaborate with the private sector? Could you give us some insights on that? Thank you very much.
Yeah, so depending on the crops, penetrating on the market, of course, we can only have impact if the new varieties end up on the market. So what is the good handoff position? If we reach a point and say we are handing off, it's difficult to demonstrate this impact, for the reason that depending on the crop, the private sector might not be interested in some of the crops that we work with. So there is a lot of informal seed systems in this case. And you can see in my previous slide, if I can just show that for crops like maize, which might be more acceptable, the adoption of new varieties is around 70%. It's almost one of those. And soybean, which is also of interest to the private sector. So that is helpful in a way, but most crops that are not of a big interest to the private sector do have a problem, and we do need to have a way of ensuring that we hand over across the value chain as needed and continue participating actually to the end.
Okay, last question from Jamie.
So sorry, my question is, there's one aspect is like trying to capture all the different management practices on the farms. The other aspect is influencing the management of the farms. So how much are you able to educate and influence that management to try and reduce, like simplify your model, kind of?
Yeah, that's a good question. And in this case, what is in the sphere of the breeding programs and their national partners in terms of developing and delivery of these varieties, they can be influences on policy in this case, but you can see that the scope is sometimes too wide. You can influence policy in one country, but not in the other one. I mean, other players like agronomy can have a big part in also driving this by developing packages for the new varieties. But the problem, the problem, as we have seen from physiology and data analysis, as Yana has alluded to, there is a disconnect across all these disciplines that could make the value chain a bit more jointed in this case. And so in our sphere of control, we need to ensure that what we are developing as genetics is relatively well adapted to what we see on smallholder farmers, depending on the scenarios that we would find there.
Okay, thanks a lot, Dorcus, for your nice talk.